Yeah. Son of a bitch. Cut your fucking ass now.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Kelli Ворден, and this is the city, Tacoma, Washington. It's pretty much born and raised here, and like all other cities, time is taking its toll. Ruthlessness here in the open world is getting a lot worse. Self-defense is becoming an everyday issue. As you can see by the first scenario, I pretty much locked out the environment. Got out of my van, locked it up. I'm here ready to take the boat out, just thinking about fun. That's usually when shit happens. If I would have been well aware of myself, I should have been able to see that this guy was coming up behind me, let alone getting slammed into the fence, another environmental asset. He used it against me. My benefit there was to use it back as a counter. He came at me with the blade. I was empty-handed, really unprepared for the situation. I might have my .45 here, nice little knife there, and a couple Spydercos here, but if I'm unaware of the fact that he's coming and shit's gonna come down, then I'm pretty much in trouble, hot water, so to speak. You know, I've written a lot of different things for different articles, stuff like that, talking about the environment, so I really feel that common sense is an initial factor in any self-defense situation. Just this last week, reading the newspaper, over 5 assaults with a screwdriver, 2 with a knife, 45, and a chainsaw. So when they take the knives away and the guns away, that doesn't mean anything. Screwdriver will stick you just as bad as a broken beer bottle or anything else. It basically comes down to controlling your environment, being aware of your own working tools, and also being prepared when shit does come down. Self-defense is a very vital issue, especially when it comes to your self-defense or your family's. A close friend told me once, if you love your family, teach them knife, no one will touch you. We all utilize the knife as a tool in today's environment, but as a self-defense implemented weapon, it bridges that gap. Sometimes a firearm, you can't get to it, access it fast enough. Doesn't matter how close it is to you, the whole idea is you're utilizing your hands to keep people off you. In a situation such as this last one, the best thing to do is approach your vehicle prepared, whether it's with capstan or with a knife, or even your keys, utilizing the car door as a self-defense implemented tool. Self-defense is just that, your self-defense. Keep in mind that he's not going to concern himself with your injuries, so that being the case, you shouldn't have to concern yourself with his either. This seems like a ruthless approach, but he's attacking you. So do what it takes to control your environment and your situation. When I opened the car door, I also had my Spyderco right here in my hand. If I go to a gas station bathroom, it doesn't matter if I got a key or lock on that door, I usually arm myself to come into the bathroom and come out of the bathroom. It's just as simple as that, being prepared for the situation. Chances are he'll be the statistic and you won't. Hey, how you doing? We're at a centralized training center now, and I want to share some of the interesting points of blade handling. Before we get involved with actual cutting, slicing, and things of that nature, really need to take the time to express the need to have etiquette in knife combatients and etiquette as far as passing a blade from one player to the next. The idea here is that if you're careful from the beginning, you're not going to harm anyone, including yourself. There's a very important part of knife training learn not to cut yourself before you learn to cut somebody else. That means understand the blade entirely as you progress in your training format. I'd like to bring one of my training partners in, Chino Santiago, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these trainers. Come on in, Chino. This trainer here is made by 3 Winds. It's got a plastic handle, aluminum blade. Even though it does look somewhat real, you can tell it will not cut you. And unlike a lot of trainers out there, you need to take the precautions. Although it has a pointed thrusting area, it has been dulled. Nonetheless, it will separate a rib or do some severe damage if you happen to thrust your training partner. The whole idea of having a training partner is give you reflection back on your techniques. If I feed something to him, I want to be able to analyze it. It's not about me getting Chino and him getting me. We have to build this up very progressively and concise. We have to take the time to really lay out a strong foundation and understand the principles of knife work and how and what our options are. So this particular knife is excellent for training because it's realistic. It has the weight plastic handle for good gripping. If you'll notice this button here, this is for a dexterity line, and we can cover that a little bit later for basically weapon grip changes. One of the nice things about Spyderco and the trainers is they have so much realistic elements with the real deal. This is just an enduro trainer, and as you see, I have the police model here. They're basically the same blade. So real close. This gives you an actual identifiable practice knife to work with that is reflective of your true carry knife. I'll put this one away. If I was presenting this to Chino in a training mode, I'd want to present it to him handle first and blade out. If I had 2 hands on this, I would control the tip in this manner and present it to him in that manner. And there again, he wouldn't just jerk it from my hand, he would acknowledge the grip, then we'd go from there. So that being the case, Chino, you want to pass that back to me? Okay. As you can see now, he's got his live hand in the clearing path. If this was a real blade, I'd pull that away, Chino would get cut. So let's try that again. Blade out, controlling the weapon tip, single hand pass, or with the double hand pass. Okay, let's work that again, Chino. Thank you. As you can see, single hand pass works good. The blade's out, I get the handle, and no one gets harmed. So this is a good training knife. This is also a good training tool to pass. A lot of times when we get 3 or 4 guys in here and we're doing real blades, and blades are passing back and forth quicker than you can identify them. Now if we're adding opening drills and things like that, boy, chances are someone's going to get cut. So even as skilled as you are, or if you've had prior training, take the time to educate your training partner and your friends about blade etiquette. Let's look at the Cold Steel Voyager. This is an exact duplicate except for the opening here, and it's definitely closed up. So the idea of this is to have an identical weapon to train with. If you carry a Voyager, it's a good idea to get your trainer so it correlates and corresponds with the movement, dexterity drills such as that. Here's the K-bar. This was made by Comtech and Edge Molding Company. The idea here is to simulate an actual K-bar knife. As you can see, got an excellent gripping area, good guard. Most of the time the guard is utilized with a saber grip. That means the thumb has to be utilized and pushed to add tension into the small of the hand here. The small fingers are gripping, drawing that into the palm as the thumb presses down. A natural grip or a hammer grip gives you a little bit more cutting action as far as power and strokes and slices, but your weapon tip dexterity is different. There again, the mindset is different. Either you're going in for an actual powerful slashing cut, or you're going for pinpoint accuracy with the tip of the blade. And that's the difference between, say, the hammer grip and the saber grip. You have a little bit more dexterity with the saber grip as far as manipulation. You distinctly have more power with the hammer grip, though. All right. Hey, we're going to move on a little bit, explain the 8 angles of movement. The whole idea of the body and targeting is to break the body and the anatomy down into specific entry lines and optional angles. Any entry he can do on me, I can do in return. If he feeds me a 1 line, I can feed him a 1 line as long as I'm monitoring his line. So A lot of techniques will counter each other. A downward stroke will be countered by a horizontal stroke. A horizontal stroke countered by a figure eight motion. But it really comes down to its angles and entries. Don't think of techniques specifically. Just think of diagrams, breakdowns. This is my center line. It runs parallel to my head, chest, pelvic area. Okay? Horizontal lines. A lot of cutting action operate on the horizontal lines. You put the two together, you got a plus sign. This same plus sign will work in your footwork, in your evasive tactics, and as well as your mobility. The thing is, don't think of it as a static position. Anytime you utilize this on the floor as a pattern, the patterns change. As you move, your platform goes with you. As his arm moves, his angles of entry also go with him. Chino facing me, please. So if I use this as a basic diagram for targeting, I have 4 entry points on this line. I can either go to the specific targets or the points, or I can go to the spaces or the quarters. When you turn this into a triangle, coming off into Kali triangle here, or a time sign, you just create more insertion points and different points of reference. That's all these are, truly is different points of reference. But you could definitely see how this could break this section down here, section here, section here, even going down into the low line, and vice versa here. Anytime you utilize an angle, think of another consisting angle that falls somewhere within that perimeter. So just taking the stick and rotating it through the center line, you can see how those angles can change. And that's the idea with blade or stick combatives, is have that mobility so that you can change angles and directions quickly. Okay, let's target some specific areas. If I have my trainer out, I'm going to go to those target areas. This is shooting to the holes, shooting to the targets. I'm just opening them. Okay? Nothing more than insertion points. Okay? As you see, I'm using somewhat of a saber grip because I'm utilizing a thrusting line. Right at this point in time, we're just pinpointing targets, going into those space areas. Open gashes in the plus sign, entering in. The exterior line here brings up on a horizontal plane and inserts. Low line, elbow position changes very little. When you come to the interior line, palm up, thrusting here. Okay? I can thrust down or slice down on this same parallel, making a circle. If you can see the circle as my body is turned, comes from top to bottom. Same line coming across on a horizontal plane. I can also make this a circle. So it's only working off of one action. From the right to the left. From the right to the left. Downward, coming down. Haven't reversed the circle yet. As I reverse the circle here, I'm limited on my plane. So I will transfer that energy into a figure eight wrist position at the top, driving down. So my cutting line can now work from bottom to top and top to bottom. As I go from the horizontal plane, it also cuts. And you'll see the wrist turning over. A lot of times in traditional martial arts or the Filipino, they call this banda-banda, the rotation of the wrist. Your grip becomes specifically a part of your style, what you prefer to use. Also, be well aware of when you're using actual targeting, which we'll get to later. I'll bring in my silent fighter, and we'll do some cutting with live blades and the trainer. You'll notice that the impact, when you hit something with your blade, we have something we call weapon impact. Then there's grip impact, and there's also weapon shock. Meaning, if I hit something real hard, chances are, whether it's a thrust, it's going to shock back into my hand. That means I have to increase the tension in my grip in order to compensate for the thrusting or the shock impact of the weapon. And we're going to move on. As you can see, Chino's got us into the diagonal slicing line here. So drawing the tip from here and cutting through on a singular line, on a singular line, on a singular line. Same thing here, drawing back, drawing back. This is working from an upward shoulder position and hand position, cutting through. I can repeat that. Sometimes considered the figure eight, okay, or a time sign. Your terminology will vary as well. It's up to you to put things into the perspective that's functional for you and you can understand it. And at the same time, if you're going to get serious about training, you're going to have to find a training partner to work with. If he's inexperienced as well, you'll have to be the teacher. You'll have to be the coach. So guidelines exist in your mind to transfer on to your training partner. Okay? Now from the top following down, I can reverse this angle. This is sometimes referred to as rompida. Naturally, the hand position is going to come back and draw away from the target. We don't want to keep our weapon hand out here just manipulating the blade. One reason we do that is so that we can separate and isolate specific drills, specific skills, then go from there once we have a broader perspective of exactly what we're trying to achieve. On this line, we have a rompida too. It's working on the exterior part of the body, so it's more of a drawing action. Horizontal plane and diagonal. Working all four lines, cutting up, down, straight across on the plus. Now adding the figure eight or the rompida lines. Okay. Anytime there's a direct line of cutting, there's also insertion points anywhere within those perspective lines. Working for some general guidelines, there again, your numbering system can change. I've been introduced to a lot of different slicing lines, some specific patterns to achieve specific results. But let's go to a more generalized format, still utilizing the plus sign, the time sign, and use entry number one. Angle number one comes at a diagonal passing and cuts through. Angle number two comes through the opposite side. So we start through the collarbone, carry down, start through the opposite side, and carry down. There's no reason to whip this back or bring this up so high that it's a descending fall, very powerful, but with a short blade, short arcing is also a viable access. Okay? So as we make the angle number one, make the angle number two. Chino, bring your arm out, please. This angle is also here. This angle is also here. It really doesn't matter. His left hand comes out, utilize the same angle. Angle number one and number two. In a lot of systems, you really don't need too much more than that. Angle number one and two will change levels. So if it's a high line and I'm cutting here, I can still use angle number one or number two. As his hand comes out or his fist comes out, I'm still utilizing angle number one or two. It's just condensed into a smaller area. Okay? Bring that down. So as I go one, two, my next line is to come across the center body. 3, 4. So if someone asks you to deliver an angle number one, you're cutting down on a figure eight. Number two, you're cutting down on the opposite side. 3, horizontal cut across the abdominal area. 4 comes the opposite side. Okay? Repeating these motions, 1, 2, 3, 4. If Chino punch comes in, there's a 3, there's a 4. And back a little bit. 3 and 4. Okay? One punch comes in, 1, a 2. See? 3, 4. Distinctly the line. If he's coming in, do you have your blade on you? Yes, sir. Okay. If he's coming in with a low line thrust, I might empty out, cut 1, cut 2. The fact is, mobility becomes a very essential issue here. Once engagement becomes a part of the equation, mobility is really a necessity. If you have nowhere to go, that's when the blade must become part of your combative defensive method. Okay? Putting the blade between you and your opponent. So after we enter on angle 1 and 2, 3, 4, we feel fairly proficient with that. Just relax and do the motions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Isolate 1 and repeat that. 1, 1, 1. This would be on an interior line, carrying it through your body. Exterior, it keeps coming from the outside. Comes from the outside, or an outside load, say off your weapon acquisition skills. Okay, drawing through. And diagonal. 1, 2, 3, 4. From this position, we're going to cut up and cut up. So this becomes our 5 and our 6. 5 and our 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. From 6th position, we drop through the center line. Okay? From 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the blade turns. We come through the center line. And we come back up for the 8 line. Depending on the hand position, that's when you thrust. So if we cut angle 1 down, we can thrust back on that line. Cut down, thrust back up. If we come back on that line, we insert our thrust here as well. So we cut down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rotation, 7, and 8. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gives us a basic diagram of breaking the body down for the slicing lines. Anywhere you hit with a knife and it cuts, it hurts. So it's not a necessity that number 1 can't come through the face, or number 1 can't come through the shoulder. Same thing with 2. There again, it changes the line. If Chino brings up a chambered knee position for like a front kick, I can cut down. I'm still cutting down on angle number 1. Doesn't matter if my blade starts here and I follow up just on the upper body, or if I cut down to a lower line. I'm still basically doing a figure 8 motion. So cutting down, horizontal across, reversing the figure 8, coming down through the center line, coming back up. This gives us 8 angles of entry, 8 angles of mobility for the slicing or the slashing lines. A good rule of thumb, just in generalized practice, is to go from slashing into your thrusting off those particular lines. If I feed in an angle number 1, I spring load off that. At the completion, sometimes the hand is here to check it, also to be alive, and to impact this so that it springs off. So when I spring off my hand, I'm loading it, almost like a ricochet. So as I cut number 1, I spring back into a thrusting line. Spring back into a thrusting line. There again, anywhere in the body, a weapon cuts or thrusts, it's going to hurt. Let's backtrack just a little bit and go to the 8 angles of movement again, the slicing. So we have downward angulation. If you want to reposition yourself, that's a little better. So we have downward slicing and downward slicing, horizontal cuts, horizontal cuts. Then we have upward figure 8 and circle down through the center and back up. Each one of these lines has a point. So as I slice, I thrust. As I slice, I thrust. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slicing, spring loading, coming into the body, it's chambered, spring off that, thrust back in. Cut, muscle tension, wrist lock, tension strength, and thrust back in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, same thing on the opposite line on the diagonal. If I thrust here, it loads me. The tension in the arm, the biceps loaded, the shoulders tight, the wrist is ready to rock. So it springs off that. I create a spring in the shoulder, response from the opposite side, and pivot through the hips. So cutting down, cutting down. Cut 1 line, return, cut 2 line, return. Cut down, return, cut up, return. Okay? 1, 2, in, and cutting up and angling down. Cutting across, cutting through and angling in. So at each one of the slicing points, you return fire with the thrust. Return fire with the thrust. Okay? And mix these lines. Feel comfortable delivering, thrusting off a slice, and change the lines. If I go to the diagonal slice, I can come across on a horizontal line. I can throw that across his face just to bring his hands up. Then I can go to insertion points. Okay? So, 1, thrust, coming back down. Angle 2, thrust, come back down. Bang. Okay? Go into the horizontal lines. Then reverse that. See, we've done the reversing by following the same line. We rompida and the banda movements. Going down through the center, thrusting back up, coming up and thrusting down. You notice it's a natural inclination to want to return as you make that thrust. The body's extended, plus it's loaded, kind of like a rubber band. We're just pop moving. So how you do this and mix these lines, slash, slash, thrust, thrust, slash, slash, thrust, thrust. These just become essential patterns. Now, instead of a numbering system, we're working off of combination slicing, thrusting, working the same pattern, but returning it, quite possibly, on a different line. Utilizing the blade to draw through, slicing. This is another important thing. Surface drag. As your weapon cuts through, you want to learn how to use that portion of the blade. No secret about the thrusting line, but cutting sometimes, to get the proper flow of the weapon, you have to practice drawing through. So it is a viable entity, or a viable part of your training, to learn to start cutting specific things. As we utilize our thrusting, sometimes we break it down into, say, a colleague thrusting triangle. The idea is to have 3 points of interest. One could be into the throat, down into the floating ribs. So 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. If I thrust here, exterior, interior, exterior, interior, down into the hips, anywhere into the shoulder region. Defanging the snake becomes an essential part of breaking down the arm or anything that's attacking you, the attacking weapon. Going into that thrusting triangle, you have many variables here. Wherever you pinpoint your initial entry line, you'll build your triangle from there. And is it essential to stay within the guidelines of that perimeter? No, not necessarily. Once you get mobile and you feel good about what you're doing, you will continue to advance and pick your own targets according to where you're at and the acquisition of those targets. As Chino entries on 1 for his thrusting, I counter his thrusting by checking my hand here. Okay, when it's a thrusting on a high line, you only have so many hand positions you can utilize. Stepping back, he thrusts high, I parry to the outside. This gives me an insertion point here as well. Okay, actually following the arm in. But that puts us at a very close range. If I can evade his weapon by stepping off at one of the specific angles, as he thrusts, I want to cut his line with a number 1. So I'm going to cut that. Okay? As you can see, I'm stepping off on a time sign with my left foot. So as he thrusts in, I evade and I make my cut. Okay? Rarely are you going to get somebody that's going to attack you on static lines. There again, this is a cooperative effort, so he can teach me and I can teach him. One more time on the high thrust, stepping back, covering, or stepping back and shielding, making sure that you're out of enough range so that you can implement your attack to his arm. No sense going into the main cavity or the main body when the arm is coming to you. This is a reference to defanging the snake. Okay? As I thrust towards Chino's neck, he'll evade back and make that same singular cut. There we we go. And he implemented the live hand, which is a close range. Implementing that, we have a longer range, which is considered largo. Side thrust, he just makes his slicing action. Thrust, slicing action, slicing action. We're going off a number angle 1, okay? If the blade was to actually make impact there, it's dragging me down, okay? Chances are my left hand will come into play, unless, of course, that was an accurate cut. If I have a leather coat on, or I'm lucky enough to be wearing a gauntlet, chances are it's not going to do as much damage as he intended it to be. This is solo cutting exercises, so we're just doing an entry line. If he followed that with a backhand slash further up the arm, then checked it, he would be in much better position to totally control the movement. As I thrust, he cuts, backhand slash, and he's got his live hand in position, and he's also ready for a thrusting finishing line. Okay, let's cover this first line thrust on a high line, evasive tactics, and also defanging the snake. The main emphasis of defanging the snake is to immobilize the attacking weapon. Defanging the snake is exactly what it sounds like. The knife is actually the opponent's teeth or the snake's teeth. So as we take that hand or take that weapon, that disengages his incoming attack. Very important element, and one not to be overlooked. You're attacking several open veins, arteries on the hand, as well as tendons and ligaments. We'll get into that specifically later with the anatomy chart. Okay? One thing you got to keep in mind here is the mobility factor. We want to keep this guy at arm's length or further. We don't want to get into a close quarter engagement. There's a bigger chance of us getting cut either accidentally or intentionally when we get close enough that the live hand's into play and we're engaging into a real close quarter engagement fighting. Okay? So as Chino brings that line up for the facial thrust, I want to evade immediately from there. As you can see, my hips stay forward and my upper body evades essentially. Come in. I'm evading back this way. It's still giving me access to do the motion. If he engages me low with the thrust, I instinctively draw my body out and suction this out. This is called emptying. I would be in somewhat a deviated stance, utilizing more weight displacement on my rear leg. As he comes back in, here again, we're using an exaggerated commitment line on his part. So he is our training aid, and he, at this point in time, he becomes our teacher, or at least a reflective part of developing skills, okay? So on the high line, I evade, drawing my body out, keeping my live hand into position, and making my cut. You'll notice that I keep my weapon hand close to my body so that I can make my cut and that my hand isn't out here, so when he drops his weapon, he finishes his cut as well. Or that my weapon hand goes out so far that if he evades my cut, I'm not in a position to where I can't counter as well. From there, he can thrust, and I can make my cut again, coming off the reverse line of the figure eight. We're going to bring Bob in here, work a couple drills, just a little bit of mobility. I'll keep an eye on these guys. He's coaching Bob. Bob will be coaching him, feeding just the high line thrust, adding a little bit of mobility, and just isolating that specific technique. Bob, would you like to join us, please? Okay, all I really need you guys to do is work with each other. Feed one guy. Once you feed him the slicing first, Bob, work a little bit of mobility. Stay within the guidelines of just slicing. There you go. Work that off. And stay to this side here. There you go. Work into the circle. Okay. Chino's gone now into a slicing line, which is similar. But there again, he's using the edge of the blade to attack now instead of the thrust. Good. And Bob's trying to get the cut. You'll notice on the slicing line compared to the thrust, the blade follows through. So Bob's clearing line is going to be much more hard, or a little bit harder, to distinguish and counter on. And it's real hard not to add that live hand in there, but there again, I want you guys to stay at long range. And as you practice this at home, or with your training partner, keep an eye out for actual openings. Once you make a slice, what's his options? Okay, once you exchange that back, Bob, you give him some thrusting lines, then you evade and do your slice. There you go. Square up, there we go. Keep that line thrusting high. You'll also notice that Bob's thumb is out like this. We consider this a Filipino style of fighting. The thumb is live. The thumb keeps the hand mobile, keeps it from being too tense. Okay, watch your camera angles, guys. There we are. Good. All right, not bad. So let's continue this for just a second. I want you to hang tight with me, Bob. The idea of this thumb motion is, say Bob does thrust me and I instinctually parry that out, or I make a cut. The thumb is used to scoop the weapon or the weapon hand and control it. We're moving a little bit further ahead, but I also want you to be able to feel free to express yourself with some variables. Sometimes weapon impact, this can be quite a detrimental grip. There's a real possibility that you're going to lose your weapon. It just depends. But the grip is similar to that of a sword, or in kendo, where you grip with the fingers pulling into the palm of the hand, and this becomes very much relaxed and open. That way you become more mobile. Thinking of defanging the snake, think about the mobility factor or the head of the cobra. The cobra doesn't sit there and then move. The cobra stays mobile, very subtle moves, and then strikes out, and then strikes out. But he doesn't become bound into a static position. So the idea is staying active in your movement, and the thumb helps maintain that activity and the relaxation needed for good quality circular, relaxed knife mobility drills.
Out of the van now! Hey, God damn it! Ah! Bitch!
Now as we're moving along, working into the thrusting line, we also have to have a little bit of insight into the line we need for evasive tactics. On a neutral position, meaning the feet are about shoulder width apart, I'm somewhat relaxed. If I'm to evade back, keeping the live hand forward or the knife hand forward, I will evade back with my right foot. This is drawing my body back. This implements the live hand as far as being the one with the most distance or the closest to the oncoming attacking weapon. In many ways, I'm also protecting my knife hand. Anything that comes within my perimeter, I'll sweep through and intercept. If I have to advance on my opponent, and I advance in with the right foot, the left hand will draw back to equalize out my balance and staying tight. No sense activating this out here for bait or anything else until I've learned enough essential skill and mobility to where it has some common sense value, or at least an applicable position. So I can shift either foot on a forward line for engagement, and I can also shuffle my footwork. Let's move that back out there a little bit. And you can shuffle your footwork, or drawing this rear foot in. Drawing this rear foot in. There's also considered the pendulum step. meaning the body swings in and the same foot steps out. So as I step in, I step out. I step in, I step out. Implementing forward pressure and evading forward pressure, depending on where the thrust is, will be the hand position up or the hand position down. Okay? Many hand positions, depending on where you're trying to guide that attacking weapon to, so you can open up target areas that are accessible to you. So utilizing targeting, hand positions, and mobility of your footwork become a Kali triangle in itself. Those become three essential values that you have to build, comprehend, and utilize in integrated sequences so that they function and you become naturally adept at those specific techniques. This is covering the linear footwork. The idea here is advancement and retreat in conjunction with thrusting and hand positions. As Chino goes slow, okay, if it's a high line thrust, I have the option, the elbow has to be down. This hand has to be in position. Now there again, this is not a static position for the hand. It's a quick slap. If I leave my hand here, he's just going to extract his blade and turn his wrist and get cutting action, which we'll cover here shortly as far as wrist manipulation and optional weapon tactics. Okay, so let's keep this on the high line. My hand position here, when it comes back, again, one more time, I can push up, okay? Push up or out, there we go. Out to the side here, out to the side here. I can slap that down. You can slap that down, slapping it down. Okay, the action is down. Here again, we want this to be strong and powerful. We don't want to ride this thing all the way down into position unless we're doing it with such force and impact that quite possibly that could be utilized as a disarming or jarring his weapon out of his hand. There again, that becomes grip shock. Once we shock his grip, he has to re-grip his weapon. That fraction of a second is the time we have to move and act, whether we're empty-handed or with the weapon. Once it's brandished, once it's implemented, we have very little time for reaction. But at the same time, in a training mode, we have to take the time to essentially follow guidelines so that we can understand these movements and progress from there. So from the high line thrust, he steps in, I parry, he parries. We slap, slap. I'm going to parry up. Okay? Parry up. Make sure that as you do this, don't give your partner a false sense of security. I trained in a lot of martial arts schools and systems, and rarely do they punch you in the face. They want to help you out, so they don't give you truly a target. Okay? Now you'll notice I'm not doing a rising block, because it'd be nothing more than an easy extraction on his part, and I pretty much got a bad cut. So that the palm provides a lot of sensitivity, and we can utilize that and move that. The forearm also provides a lot of powerful driving force there for shocking the opponent as well. But different positions will be implemented according to the height and depth of the weapon that he's inserting towards us or as he attacks. On a high line, it's much easier for me to go with this hand because it's alive, it's fast, compared to getting this forearm in here. If I'm very close and he thrusts, then chances are I'm going to have to utilize that forearm. I'm not going to have the distance or the dexterity to utilize the hand position. Okay, we're going to stay on this a little bit more. We're going to bring the thrust down into the abdominal area or the lower chest cavity. The idea of this is so that we can implement just a little bit bigger variety of hand positions and show you why we're doing that. If you notice, these come off the plus sign, or at 90-degree angles. But there again, where the hand is when you implement it, it can be on a time sign. It's all about angles, and each angle has an intricated part of the other. If I come in at a 45, it matters not. The idea is to stay mobile and activate those lines. With the pendulum step, we're exchanging and bridging a distance. So at the same time, even though it's simple as it seems, we're getting a sense of reality as far as distancing, timing, perception, mobility while we're moving. It's not quite static. We haven't built up to be very repetitive yet, but we're moving on from that position. So the pendulum step off the lower abdominal is very important to learn those things, the essential values of evasive tactics and at the same time advancing. So off the pendulum step, once you take position in here, he thrusts in. You'll notice my hand position now doesn't have to be quite as far out. My hand position here, I'll have a little bit more variables. I can tap down, tap up, and now at this point I can tap on the inside, pushing that out, opening that particular line. Sorry, I didn't step with you there. That's okay. That's my fault. So as he thrusts in, I'm going to tap this one. That will open up that center line. He passes down. As I thrust out this way, this opens up the floating rib cage, even the kidney area. As I open and pass out this way, here we got the abdominal. If I drive up, this opens up under the arm or any of the other targets down in there, even if I want to implement a low slash. Keep in mind, anytime I tap anything, I want to also evade that line so that I don't become part of his retraction process. The blade goes out, but it also comes back. It doesn't just cut on the insertion, it cuts on the exit as well. So utilizing this pattern, let's go with the 4 hand positions. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now this is all strictly off an abdominal thrust or a straight line pivot utilizing the pendulum step. Straight in, straight back, 4 tapping positions of the live hand, side, side, top, and bottom, basically attacking at 90-degree angles. Very unique drill for developing the distancing, timing, and also weapon perception. Hey man, what's going on? Whoa! Bitch, better get your ass out of here. Let's keep going here. I'm trying to cover this linear footwork here, evading in and out on the pendulum footwork or the pendulum stepping. The idea of that is to empty out with the step. Sometimes linear, there's no place to go. There's no place to back up to. So as you draw out, you're in a tight spot, even against the wall. Now body pivoting or body rotation becomes very important. To take somebody that's fairly wide and stout and turn them sideways to evade a particular target. So one of the ways I like to do this is start with Chino thrusting me to the shoulders. He'll thrust on an exterior line. I'm just going to evade out. Let's go ahead. That's a straight thrust. Go ahead and enter with an angulation. I'm going to empty out on that side. When he comes to the interior, I'm going to empty out there as well. So this becomes very viable just in movement and shifting the hips. So when the hips turn, the shoulder will follow. As the thrust comes in and targets, it's real close, right? You're just evading that. Now we add a little bit of footwork, taking this foot and stepping it right behind and shifting out a little bit more. Taking out. A little bit more mobile, and we're shifting on this line. Naturally, the hand position can come into play. We're not interested at this point in time other than for monitoring distancing and depth. Okay, distancing and depth. As Chino paused for a second, I'll draw my blade out. Now we're going back out to blade length. There's no reason to say so close that the live hand's being implemented until it's necessary to utilize that range. Meaning, if I can take advantage of long range, I have to do that. I need to do that. As soon as he gets close enough, he's got more targets on me. I don't want that necessarily. I want to keep him at arm's length or a good viable distance for blade implementation. Back up just a little bit, would you? So as he enters with his thrusting on this line, I evade and make my cut. I evade and make my cut. Evade and make my cut. Still keeping my live hand close. I don't want it back here. I want it close enough to where if I have to, it comes into play to position him or to activate him. Meaning I'm making a cut and going into a position to where I can control him or limit his access to my body. Anytime that I turn this way and make my cut, or I turn and I miss, he's also got the option of emptying out and cutting through, following through with his thrusting line, going on to a diagonal thrust or a diagonal slash. Let's try the interior thrusting. As I evade to this line, I want to step this foot back as well. This foot evades back. This puts me in checking position here. Largo line. Largo line. Cutting. Okay. Cutting. So let's do the pendulum, stepping in. I step back, and he steps back. I step back, he steps back. Remember the variable hand positions here, depending on where you're trying to direct him and what you're trying to open. See? Now he enters on the thrusting line, same thing. I cut and I check. This pushes that weapon away. On this side here, I cut and I check. That pushes the weapon away. Relax for a second. So as we're adding up, going to these drills, take that time. Go to a straight line thrust, interior, exterior load. Interior and exterior just means that the body or the knife is looping to create this circle here. Looping. So I have the front thrust, then angling out, adding my thrust into here. There again, your weapon grip is going to depend on the skills that you develop and how you feel comfortable with it. Also, what weapon you're utilizing. Okay? If it's your natural carry weapon, one of the ones you're going to utilize in everyday self-defense situations, there again, focus on a trainer that's close to that type of a tool. Okay? That's what a knife is. It basically becomes a tool of self-defense. It only becomes a weapon when the mind implements it as such. All right? So he thrusts to the center mass, I empty out. Or he thrusts to the center mass, I parry, then I cut. He thrusts to the exterior line, I parry, then I cut. In general, we want steel to meet flesh. We don't want to meet flesh with flesh, giving him the chance to execute a cut on us. So we're going strictly for the Largo line here. He thrusts, I cut. Evading out, thrust, I cut. Thrust, I cut. If he goes to a abdominal, I can step back, or I can do one of the other footwork patterns, depending on where I want to end up, on the exterior part of his body or the interior. Interior, as he thrusts, and I come to here, I'm also in range for that punch to the chops. Chances are, if I made a good cut here, he's worried about recovering that hand, and he's not so concerned about punching me in the chops. A singular cut can be very powerful and can be very deadly all on its own. So as I make the movement here and you empty out, I have to be aware that on a basis of body movement and body mechanics, pushing or hitting this rotates the body, activating his other weapons or his other tools, even a knee spike or a front kick or anything like that. So I'm activating as I push out. As he thrusts and I evade, I close the line. Well, the only thing he can do here is a spinning technique or try to close by entering through one of the opening lines or one of the opening gates, entry window, angle, so on and so forth. If this hand is up higher, naturally his angle is limited with his left hand. If it's down, there's a much more big or a larger window in which he can access me or target me as well. Whew, man, I kicked my ass today running that shit. Hey man, what's going on?
Not much.
Got something behind your back, get the shit up. All right. One of the things I want to cover is the fact that as you thrust the knife and you retract the knife, or the extraction motion, is the rotation of the hand. If I go for a straight line thrust on the straight line perimeter, whether it's with a hammer grip or a saber grip, remember I explained the dexterity variables there, and also the commitment line needed for each one of those to be executed. So as I thrust, if I pull back, the blade turns. As I thrust, the blade turns. So, that being the case, anything he checks on this side, I draw away from. Let's bring Tom in, and we can explain this a little bit closer with his weapon, my hand position, and we'll go from there. Come on in, Tom. So, Tom going with the straight thrust, if I parry down, his extraction is going to draw across that way. So that being the case, when he thrusts down, bang! I want to get my hand out of there as quick as possible. Let's do that again. Thrust, bang! Okay, now I want you to thrust me a little faster. Yeah, see, now I didn't feel a nick there. And that's important. You're going fairly fast, aren't you? Okay. So we want to test each other. Let's back up a little bit. We want to test each other and work each other in conjunction. As he thrusts in, bang! I want to get in. Does it feel like it was a pretty good deflection? And you're tight. Communication skills with your training partner. Boom. Very viable accent. If I don't like the guy, I could have called you a name there, but I didn't. If I don't like this guy, chances are I'm going to try to knot him up and bang him around. But what happens when it's my turn? Chances are, if we're still teamed up, he's going to knot me up and bang me around. Pretty soon we're both pissed at each other. We're not having any fun, and we're not learning much because we've lost that mode or train of thought. We're not in the learning process now, we're in the hurting process. Completely wrong set of mind, wrong mindset to deal with this. Let's go again slow. As I tap his hand down, he extracts in that manner. Okay? So if I'm on the inside line, see, chances are he can draw it that way. On the outside line, he can draw either straight down, up, or anything else as I shoot it up. See? Now the impact of that weapon, watch for a second, bang. Okay, thrust me quick. Thrust me quick. Chances are that he's going to have to change real quick on his rotation. Bang. What else could he do? He could enter that straight line thrust with a little bit of twist in his wrist already. So if he thrusts on a straight line and turns his wrist a little bit and I tap down, it's a natural position and the wrist is almost spring-loaded to come out of that position into a new chamber line or change directional lines. So as he thrusts straight in, boom, and he retracts, he's going to cut the palm. Okay, utilizing my right hand, say I don't have a knife hand, I go like that, he's going to turn his wrist the other direction. It just doesn't take much time to do that. Even if it's a clearing line, and he retracts it and goes to a thrust. So if I drop my hand in there, bang, and retracts it, then it loads him in for a thrusting position. Let's do that fast. What I'm going to do is a right-handed parry, palm of his hand. There's also a lot of nerves in here, so if I slap that hard, chances are his fingers will loosen up and he'll lose the grip. But I'm going to tap him fairly hard. He's going to try to retract that and get a quick thrust in. So let's go. See? So that being the case, I'm going to have to really sector myself out. If I'm here and he goes, hum, hum, I'm going to have to start moving. Now we're adding a little bit more mobility to the factor, secondary attack to the equation, and evasive tactics off the initial entry line. Okay? Let's go back to that again. I'm going to go with my left hand, and I'm going to party that out like this, slapping it to that side. Where's his return line? As I slap that, he can draw back over the same line without having to go too far away from his intended target. Okay? Thrusting, bang, and I party there. He's still in ready position. I haven't done enough to him to really negate his entry other than the fact I negated the first line. He's still ready, and he still can come. Okay? So my positions will change. Here we go, real slow. 1, retraction there. 2, retraction on the top. If I go into the inside, he can cut that way. If I go up, boom. Okay? Why would I go up? He's pressing me fast, and I'm evading, possibly on a high line. I'm evading that back. I'm losing my balance. If I don't go up, chances are he's going to go into the attack. Why would I go low? Because he's attacking me low. But my head goes beyond my knees, creating a balance obstruction. Plus, I'm close to his attacking weapon. You have to take the time to analyze these possibilities, these variables, and then we can build from there. And you can build too. So what we have is essential hand positions on the entry, and then being aware of what his options are on the exit or the extraction of the motion. And that also goes if he thrusts and I have the chance to grab. He can clear my hand and cut the shit out of me. If he stabs and I grab here, he clears my hand and cuts me there. And he's using a trainer, and I think I'm almost bleeding. Okay? So as he goes there and I parry that way and I grab, he cuts that way. Sometimes he doesn't even have to clear my hand with his hand. I just grab and he's gone. This, there isn't much strength there. Now I'm just using finger, thumb, and tendon strength. He's using extraction of the forearm and the bicep, plus possibly his hip. So it makes very little common sense to me to grab this unless I can tap it, hit it, bang, then grab it. You know, then I'm going into my line. But there again, we're building progressively into this foundation, into this format. The whole idea is to become aware of this hand position. You'll notice Bob's making a little bit broad. So in training sometimes, even though we're focusing on a one-shot stop, we don't want that to be the mindset. One-shot stop, and we stop, chances are it wasn't a good slash, it wasn't a good parry, it wasn't a good check. And this guy still got energy, and now he's pissed, more like a beehive coming at you. So once you make your initial entry line, in training, always cut 3 or 4 times. Finish with a thrust. Enter with the thrust. Finish cutting 2 or 3 times. Do this in training to train the motor skills with the mindset to follow up. Eliminating the tunnel vision or eliminating the fear and all the bullshit that goes along with this, as you progress in your training, you become more composed. You're able to recognize the threat. You're able to position yourself, taking one initial slice and throwing a chair in front of the guy or evading the target. That's your safest bet. We're going to bring Bob and Tom out here. We're going to have one guy work on a singular slice or a singular thrust. Keep in mind, there is a difference between thrusting and slicing. Slicing, you're very active. Thrusting, you're coming in on a direct line of attack into that motion. That's where there's a lot of confusion between people in knife combat is. Well, the guy's slashing at you, you got a little bit of evasive tactics, or he's just taking little bits and pieces. Same thing applies. You are taking little bits and pieces. When he commits to a thrust, this guy's got something serious on his mind, and that's the taking of your ass. A thrust creates a completely different mental impact. Slashing, you might be able to, oh shit,
thrust is just like stepping on a nail. Immediately your body locks up, and it's a different kind of shock, a different kind of trauma. So when the thrust line comes, it's much more committed. The guy doesn't go like this. His exit line isn't quite as clean as a thrust line. Being able to thrust and draw out compared to being able to thrust or slash and draw out. Being able to thrust, rarely can you return thrust and return off any line that has such a degree of circumference like a slash does. I could slash and pull my hand at different lines, but if I thrust, I have to come back in and out on a line that's very close to those targeting. So it is a committed motion, and you can take advantage of that. At the same time, be well aware of the deadliness of the thrust. Let's bring you guys in. Enough of me talking, and we'll have Bob attack Tom first. Just on that 5, 6, and 7 line. Well, actually, what we're going to do is work the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 on the slashing lines. Tom's going to do some covering up, checking, and doing slashing. So we're going to start slow and build these guys into a couple sets on an exchange basis. So go ahead, guys. Work this off. Okay, good. Good. Okay, that gives us 4 lines of attack, Bob entering. We're going to stay on that. I want you to keep entering on this, but this time I want you to vary that distance a little bit. When he attacks, evade out. Get your initials, slash, then close in on this guy. So don't go right into activating the live hand, but get an initial slash, cover check, then get your slicing in there, okay? Much better. There you go. So get your initial cut without getting that live hand involved. These guys are trying to keep it calm and slow, and sometimes that's hard to do. It's like in training, keep going guys, in training, first thing everybody wants to do is get that live hand, that live knife in their hand and start cutting. Well, it's really important to develop essential cutting patterns, slicing patterns, and the coordination that goes along with that. Okay, why don't you go ahead and give it to Bob. Don't get that live hand in there yet, Bob. Just stay out at Largo, cut. There you go. You'll notice Bob's making a little bit broader sweeps, and there's nothing wrong with that. What broad sweeping action does is create fluidity. A lot of people ask me, Mr. Ворден, how is it you become so fluid in your techniques? And being a big guy, I have to tell them, I start out with broad circular motions. Add the dexterity and the mobility of the body and the limbs working in conjunction. Then I tighten the circles. In order to make something big move, you have to push it slow. Then increase the speed, increase the mobility, add the body mechanics. All right, you guys, you're looking pretty smooth. That's it. And see, that's something you can comprehend and see in motion. So you want the comprehension level of this to be very essential part of your training. You want to be able to see what you're doing, making the cut, and control those motions. Okay, we're going to bring Tom and Bob back in here, get them moving around just a little bit. Keep in mind, the essential goal still here is defanging the snake, attacking the attacking limb. Now, attacking the attacking limb doesn't necessarily mean he's leading off with his knife. Maybe the guy's going to throw an eye jab at your face, take your eyes out or something. You still have to cut that. If he's a good kicker or he's a mover, he throws something evasive. Even if it's a low-line kick, you either have to monitor it, shift, or move. You have basically 4 long-range weapons, the feet and the hands. Add the knife, that gives you some equations to counter those aggressive lines as well. Then you have close quarters, which implements the knees and the elbows. Then you have headbutt range as well. So there's a lot of different weapons that can be moving at you at a lot of different speeds, right? These guys are moving on you, coming at you. If it's a multiple attack situation, there's no question you're going to have to draw a blade or do some serious thinking and do some serious slamming quickly. So keep in mind, one of the things we want to do here is essentially defang that snake, then move off that line. When you're training, if you notice, we defang the snake, realistically, we should be dropping that blade. Go to a blade seminar and there's 50 guys out there, boy, I tell you, ting-ting-ting-ting, 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 get a hell of a workout just bending over and picking up that knife. So a lot of times when they're doing the drills, it's on an exchange basis with the understanding that the arm has been negated, the weapon has been negated, and what we have now is a follow-up routine. So don't put much merit in the fact that they're not dropping the blade, because they are being defanged, then they're following up from there. But since this is a training mode, training mindset, and we're trying to move consistently in time, in conjunction with each other, and do the most training as we can in the given length of time we have, they're not going to drop their blades and be picking them up. So let's get you guys in here. Let's get you engaging a little bit. I'm going to step out of the scene here and just start off slow and build it from there. Sometimes you'll hear that slapping on the body. What that does is give you initial reaction, a rebound type of a feeling. Also, sometimes that creates a distraction in sound. So as you're doing the rebound, sometimes it activates your hand, keeps you live, keeps your hand out, but at the same time brings that hand back into play. They're moving fairly efficient here with the slicing and the thrusting lines, and progressively building it into more of a close quarter engagement. If the knife is disarmed, that's fine. We can build from there. Okay, good. Not bad, guys. Okay, well, keep in mind while you're training, the greatest thing that happened was we wouldn't have to implement our knife at all. Chances are we could use an environmental tool, a chair or something else, even verbal implementation of, hey, get the hell off me! Start screaming and yelling. Sometimes just that adds enough shock to the situation, attention to everything, that he's no longer concealed in his methodology of wanting to get to you or attack you. So common sense, being able to recognize an aggressive individual, evading the scene, and taking all those precautionary measures of saying, hey man, maybe this isn't the place to be, and try to make a graceful exit, that's the most important thing. But if you're cornered in a situation and you have to implement your weapons or your tools, make sure you do it with the mindset that you're only taking as much as you have to control the situation.
Okay, let's do this. Hey man, I want to borrow some money.
Hey,
I want to borrow some money.
Hey, ain't got no money, man. I'm here with my old lady.
No man, we want to borrow some money.
Hey, just back off, guys. Back off.
No problem. No problem.
Jesus Christ, man. Excuse me? Hey, hi, how you doing? Okay, all right.
Take that one, man.
Hey, can I get a shot of Cuervo, Corona, and orange juice down here, please? Thank you.
How's everything going?
Hello, de pasa? Nada. That's my seat, man. And no apology.
Hey, I don't know who you sit here. Come on, let's get out of here. Come on.
Kick that fucker's ass. Knife safety, gun safety, self-defense is all an issue of awareness, being prepared. This tape is all about that, trying to give you a chance to prepare yourself. I didn't go into a lot of in-depth lines. I can play those lines, but in general, those are seriously kill lines. What we're here talking here is self-defense. Let's just defang the snake, control the situation, get out of there with our ass intact. Hope you had a good time. I'd like to thank everybody that was a part of this production, including my sister and my mother and my cousin. All those people at Paladin Press that gave me a chance to rock the world with you. So, let's hang tight, let's kick ass. And let's kill the motherfucker on the moped. You dumb bitch! What's wrong with you?
Where's that big boy?
I think that'll do it.